Welcome back everyone to the third round of our wild ride through the Nintendo 64's most controversial classics. We've already blown the lid off some heavy hitters in parts 1 and 2, but if you thought those tales were spicy, strap in, because today we're diving deeper into the cartridge chaos that shook the late 90s gaming scene. This was a time when the N64 was king, but not every game played nice. Some rolled in with violence, attitude, or just plain weirdness that had parents freaking out, fans fighting, and critics scratching their heads. Smash that like button and hit subscribe if you're new, and let's blast into another 10 controversial Nintendo 64 games. Asteroids Hyper 64. Released for the Nintendo 64 in 1999, enrolled in an ambitious remix of the 1979 arcade classic that swapped vector lines for 3D polygons and a shiny N64 sheen. Developed by Cyrox Developments and published by Crave Entertainment, this wasn't just a nostalgia grab, it was a full-on overhaul, with new ships, wild weapons like homing missiles and the Armageddon laser, and a gauntlet of 90 levels across 6 zones, teeming with radioactive asteroids and alien swarms. But here's where the controversy kicks in, is when the game landed during a cultural storm over video game violence. Asteroids Hyper 64 leaned hard into chaos. Exploding asteroids sent debris flying, enemy ships fired relentless barrages, and multiplayer modes like Deathmatch turned friends into foes in a frantic free-for-all. Critics and concerned parents zeroed in on this intensity, arguing it glorified destruction and aggression, even if it was all sci-fi fantasy. For a console marketed to families, this beefed-up asteroid felt like a rogue asteroid crashing into Nintendo's squeaky clean orbit, sparking debates about whether retro reboots were veering too far into mature territory. The controversy didn't just orbit around content, it crashed into the game's very soul, splitting the N64 right down the middle. On one hand, Asteroids Hyper 64 promised a flashy evolution. 3 ship types with tweakable stats, co-op tow rope shenanigans, and the particle effects that popped when your shields took a hit. Pretty slick for a system pushing its limits. But the execution? That's where the thrusters misfired. The controls were sluggish, making it a chore to dodge cloaked asteroids or nail those pesky UFOs that dipped around like cosmic gnats. The small ones could one-shot you, while the big ones barely justified the ammo. The lack of in-game music, just retro bleeps and booms, felt like a lazy nod to the arcade roots, leaving the action oddly hollow. Critics trashed it as a shallow cash-in, warning all but die-hard Asteroid fans to steer clear, while fans argued it was a misunderstood gem bogged down by the N64's clunky analog stick. This divide turned Asteroids Hyper 64 into a lightning rod. Was it a bold reimagining crushed by technical woes, or a soulless shell that betrayed the simplicity of the original? In an era when N64 classics like Super Mario 64 set sky-high bars, this asteroid didn't just miss the mark, it became a controversial footnote in retro gaming's rocky revival. Battle Tanx. Battle Tanx released for the N64 in 1998. Developed by the 3DO company, this post-apocalyptic action game threw players into a wasteland where a virus has wiped out 99% of the world's women, leaving the survivors, called Queen Lords, fought over by tank-driving gangs. You play Griffin Spade, a lone warrior blasting across a ruined America to rescue his fiancée Madison from rival factions. Sounds wild, right? But here's where the controversy ignited. The game's premise lead hard into graphic violence. Tanks crushing cars, leveling buildings, and turning enemies into smoking wrecks, all in vivid 3D carnage. Battle Tanx hit a nerve in a society already on the edge about video game violence. Critics and parents balked at its mature ESRB rating on the console synonymous with kids gaming, worrying it glorified destruction and objectified women as prizes to be rescued. The multiplayer modes like Battle Lord, a tank-twisted capture the flag with Queen Lords as the flag, only fan the flames, making it a poster child for the era's moral panic over interactive bloodshed. For some it was a thrilling rebellion, for others it was a dangerous line crossed on Nintendo's turf. The controversy didn't just rumble over its content, it roared through the game's bold ideas, clashing with shaky delivery. Battle Tanx wasn't subtle. 9 gangs from Skull Riders to Psycho Brigade duked it out with an arsenal of power-ups like nukes and swarmers, all across destructible cities like San Francisco and Chicago. The promise? Total chaos with up to 4 players in modes like Annihilation, where the last tank standing wins. But the execution hit a snag. The N64's analog stick made tank handling feel like wrestling a drunk rhino. And the visuals? While ambitious, chugged under the console's limits, leaving some levels a blurry mess. Critics were divided, some calling it fast and fun, but others dubbed it as a rental at best, slamming its repetitive campaign and wonky controls. Fans loved the mindless destruction and split-screen mayhem, but purists cried foul, arguing it cheapened Nintendo's polish with a half-baked port of an arcade-style excess. Add in the wild plot, governments hoarding women and gangs fighting for dominance, and battle tanks became a lightning rod for a daring mashup of Mad Max and Tokyo Wars that thrilled some, baffled others, and left a dent in the N64's wholesome legacy, all while dodging the censor's crosshairs.
Adventure Racing!
Beetle Adventure Racing. Beetle Adventure Racing released for the N64 in 1999, turning heads and raising eyebrows with its wild mix of Volkswagen Beetles and high-octane chaos. Developed by Paradigm Entertainment and EA Canada, this wasn't just a racing game, it was a full-on adventure, with sprawling tracks like Inferno Isle and Metro Madness, packed with shortcuts, nitro boosts, and smashable crates. But here's where the controversy sparked. The game's Beetle Battle Mode, a 4-player vehicular slugfest where you hunted ladybugs while blasting rivals with rockets and mines. The game's mature vibe clashed with Nintendo's wholesome image, especially with its gritty, breakbeat soundtrack, and the premise that swapped Sunday drives for reckless rampages. Critics fretted it was too aggressive for the platform, while EA's deal with Volkswagen stirred whispers of shameless product placement. Why else plaster a family car across a game about crashing and bashing? For some it was a fresh thrill. For others, a Beetle-sized betrayal of the N64's cozy roots. The controversy didn't just rev up over content, it roared through the game's rollercoaster reception. On one hand, Beetle Adventure Racing was a technical marvel. Its massive, twisty tracks oozed creativity, from lava-spewing volcanoes to haunted woods with ghostly howls, all rendered with slick polygon flair. But the flip side? That ambition came with baggage. The controls could feel like steering a stubborn bug through molasses, and the N64's foggy draw distance turned distant turns into guesswork. Fans adored the exploration. Hunting secret paths felt like a treasure chase, but critics slapped it with lukewarm reviews, calling it a rental over a must-own, frustrated by its limited car roster. All Beetles, no variety, and repetitive AI. The Australian version, HSV Adventure Racing, swapped Beetles for Holden cars, fueling debates about whether EA was pandering to local markets or just flexing its licensing muscle. Add in a cancelled sequel and whispers of its Need for Speed 64 origins, and you've got a game that polarized players. A cult classic for some, a quirky misfire for others, stuck in the crosshairs of a console-era wrestling with identity and expectation. BioFreaks. BioFreaks released on the N64 in 1998 and crash-landed like a rogue cyborg in a kiddie pool. Developed by Sapphire and released by Midway, this 3D fighter threw players into a dystopian Neo-America, where bioengineered monstrosities like Zipperhead and Cyclown duked it out for corporate supremacy. The controversy? It was a bloodbath on a console built for family fun. In the late 90s, video game violence was public enemy number 1. And BioFreaks didn't just flirt with the line, it pole vaulted over it with a mature ESRB rating that stuck out like a sore thumb on N64 shelves. Parents and critics freaked out, decrying it as a gateway to aggression, while its censorship battles added fuel to the fire. Nintendo nixed a topless sabotage design to dodge an adults-only rating, but the toned-down gore still got banned in Germany. For some, it was a gritty thrill. To others, it was a biomechanical middle finger to Nintendo's wholesome vibe. The chaos didn't stop at the blood. It spilled into the game's guts, where ambition and flaws collided like rocket-powered fists into a meat grinder. BioFreaks aimed high, 8 freaky fighters with jetpacks soaring across multi-tiered arenas, dodging lava pits and buzzsaws, all powered by a 3D engine that lets you sever limbs and keep swinging. except the controls were a clunky nightmare. Imagine steering a tank with a broken joystick while the camera spun around like a drunk drone, leaving you spamming projectiles just to survive. Fans loved the campy chaos. Cyclone's hammer-smashing antics were a riot, but purists argued it was a sloppy cash grab riding Midway's bloody coattails, not a real N64 fighter like Super Smash Bros., fueling debates about whether it even belonged on the system. Biofreaks became a polarizing relic, too wild to tame, too rough to shine, and a perfect storm in gaming's violent culture clash. Blast Corps. Blast Corps released for the N64 in 1997, developed by Rare, the Golden Boys behind GoldenEye. This action puzzle hybrid had you piloting a wild lineup of vehicles, bulldozers, dump trucks, even a mech called Thunderfist, to clear a path for a runway nuclear missile carrier. Sounds fun, right? Well, it was, until the controversy rolled in. The core hook was destruction. You'd flatten buildings, crush cars, and demolish entire villages, all to stop a nuclear weapon. Dropping just as video game violence debates were heating up, Blast Corps caught flack for its gleeful chaos. Parents and critics worried that smashing everything in sight, even in a cartoonish sci-fi wrapper, might normalize aggression for the N64's younger crowd. Sure, it wasn't bloody, but the sheer scale of wreckage, coupled with the save the world by destroying it vibe, rubbed some the wrong way. Rare pitched it as pure fun, but for Watch Dogs, it was a demolition derby too close to the edge of Nintendo's family-friendly turf. The controversy didn't just bulldoze through its premise, it roared into the game's brutal difficulty and divisive design. Blast Corps was a technical flex, 50+ levels of destructible mayhem from quaint hamlets to neon-lit cities, all rendered with the N64's chunky charm. You'd swap between a backlash truck, a cyclone suit, and a glitchy jetpack, all while racing a timer tighter than a vice grip. For some it was genius, a puzzle-packed adrenaline rush that demanded precision and quick thinking, but for others, they hit a wall. Literally. The controls were a mess, with vehicles handling like they'd skipped driver's ed, and the later levels cranked the difficulty so high you'd need ninja reflexes to snag those golden medals. Critics docked it for punishing players with tedious precision tasks and a camera that loved to hide the action. Fans adored the chaos. Detractors called it a frustrating slog masquerading as innovation, but Blast Corps became a battleground, loved for its daring, loathed for its flaws, and a controversial gem that dared to ask, how much destruction is too much on Nintendo's watch? Before we move on with our list, I'd love to know what you think so far. Sound off in the comments below if you're enjoying this video. And while you're down there, be sure to hit the like button. It helps out more than you know. And be sure to subscribe so you don't miss any upcoming videos. Okay, back to the list. Bomberman 64. Bomberman 64 exploded onto the Nintendo 64 in 1997, bringing Hudson Soft's iconic maze-blasting hero into the 3D era. This wasn't just another chapter for the little guy in a white helmet, it was a radical reinvention, swapping the top-down grid battles of old for a full-on 3D adventure across sprawling stages like Green Gardens and Blue Resort, tasked with thwarting the evil Altair by lobbing bombs at foes, toppling towers, and even riding Kangaroo Bot. But the controversy detonated when this leap to 3D split the fanbase like a perfectly placed explosive. Purists cried foul. Where were the tight, symmetrical arenas of the Super Nintendo classics? The single-player mode, with its open-ended levels and tricky platforming, felt like a betrayal of Bomberman's roots. While the violence, however cartoonish, raised eyebrows in '97. Blow up a boss with a bomb to the face? Cool for some, but for others, it clashed with Nintendo's family-friendly reputation, sparking debates about whether this 3D glow-up was a bold evolution or a misfired blast from the past. The fuse kept burning with Bomberman 64's multiplayer and execution, turning controversy into full-on showdown. The classic 4-player battle mode was back. Drop bombs, trap rivals, last one standing wins. And it was still a riot, with maps like Rock Garden and Seaside adding 3D twists like cliffs and bridges. But the catch? It wasn't the same. The N64's clunky analog stick made dodging blasts a chore, and the shift from 2D simplicity to 3D chaos threw off veterans. Bombs rolled unpredictably, and the camera could leave you blindsided. Fans were also split. Some loved the shiny new coat of paint and that Konami arcade vibe, while others mourned the lost soul of their grid-based glory days. Throw in a wild soundtrack and Bomberman 64 became a powder keg, a daring 3D gamble that thrilled some, ticked off others, and lit up the N64 with a bang that's still debated today. Buck Bumble. Buck Bumble released for the Nintendo 64 in 1998, a third-person shooter that's equal parts quirky and chaotic. Developed by Argonaut Software and published by Ubisoft, this game cast you as Buck, a cyborg bumblebee armed to the stinger, fighting a mutant insect army called the Herd, bent on world domination, all set in a futuristic 2010 London garden gone rogue. Sounds like a blast, right? Well, it was, until the controversy stung. Dropping in the late 90s, Buck Bumble landed smack in the cultural hornet's nest. Its graphic insect combat, blasting wasps with rocket launchers, and zapping beetles with Tesla lasers, just to name a few, earned it a teen ESRB rating. But that didn't stop parents from buzzing about its intensity on a console marketed for kids. For some, it was a fresh sting of innovation. For others, a rogue bee in Nintendo's family-friendly hive. The controversy didn't just hum around its vibe, it swarmed the game's execution, splitting fans like a hive under attack. Buck Bumble promised big, 20 missions across 3D gardens, a buzzing arsenal from grenades to EMP cannons, and 2 multiplayer modes, Buzz Battles Dogfights and Buzz Balls Soccer with Guns Chaos. But the delivery? That's where the stinger sank in. The N64's infamous fog choked visibility, and controls were slippery. Flying Buck felt floaty but clunky, especially with that single analog stick, leaving players dodging mines and drowning in ponds if they lingered too long. Buck Bumble became a buzzsaw battleground, a cult hit for its weird charm, a punching bag for its flaws, and a lightning rod in an era when N64 games were expected to soar, not stumble. I just want to apologize for all the B puns. ECW Hardcore Revolution. Hardcore Revolution released in the year 2000, promising to bring the gritty chaos of extreme championship wrestling to your living room. Developed by Acclaim Entertainment, this brawler boasted 40 ECW stars, duking it out in barbed wire matches and 20-plus brutal modes like the three-way dance, all narrated by Joey Styles' iconic commentary. But the controversy didn't just grapple with content, it pile-drived into the game's soul, exposing a recycled mess that had fans and critics swinging their chairs at each other. ECW Hardcore Revolution wasn't built from scratch. It was a reskin of WWF Attitude, right down to the clunky controls and glitchy grapples where punches phase through foes like ghosts. The promise of ECW's anarchic spirit got neutered by stiff mechanics and a deathmatch mode too tame to wield weapons outside the ring. Fans were split. Some felt ripped off by the lack of innovation, while others dug the roster and Joey's calls despite the flaws. Dropping in an era when AKI's WrestleMania was king, ECW Hardcore Revolution became a battle royale of disappointment versus devotion, a controversial misfire that couldn't catch the extreme check its title wrote. Flying Dragon. Flying Dragon swooped on the N64 in 1998. A fighting game with a split personality that sparked more than just combo debates. Developed by Culture Brain and published by Natsume, this title packed 2 modes into one cartridge. The chibi-fueled SD mode with RPG flair where you'd level up fighters and snag over 200 items, and the gritty virtual mode, a 3D brawler echoing Virtua Fighter. But here's where the controversy kicked off. Its violent edge landed awkwardly in 1998, earning a teen ESRB rating that clashed with the Nintendo 64's kid-friendly reputation. Its anime-stylized aggression felt like a rogue dragon in Nintendo's peaceful skies, fueling debates about age-appropriate gaming in an already jittery era. The real controversy erupted among players and critics as Flying Dragon's bold swing and innovation landed a split-decision KO. SD mode was a treasure hunt, but critics griped about cryptic item unlocks and a save system that could wipe hours if your controller pack glitched. Virtual mode promised 3D sidesteps and ranked battles, but ended up being mediocre, docking it for choppy graphics and a soundtrack of MIDI clunkers that failed to please. The divide grew stark. Some hailed its 20-plus characters and RPG hooks as a hidden gem dropping on a console starved for fighters. But Flying Dragon became a battleground, lauded for ambition, lashed for execution, and a controversial footnote in the N64's scrappy underdog story.
It's tail time!
Gek64, Enter the Gecko. Enter the Gecko released in 1998. A sassy platformer with a gecko who'd rather deliver wisecrack than save princesses. Crystal Dynamics' green hero Gex, voiced by Dana Gould, crash-landed from the PlayStation with a mission: zap through TV-inspired worlds to stop the evil Rez. But here's where the controversy sparked. Gex's mature humor was a culture shock on the N64. Its pop culture jabs and crude quips clashed hard with Nintendo's kid-friendly vibe. Dropping in '98, its teen ESRB rating raised eyebrows among parents expecting Mario's squeaky clean charm. Some fans loved the edge, but for Watch Dogs, this wisecracking lizard was a Trojan horse sneaking adult sass into a family console, stirring debates about tone and taste in Nintendo's sandbox. The controversy didn't just tail-whip the humor, it clung to Gek64's rocky port and divisive execution, splitting players like a gecko shedding skin. The N64 version promised 22 levels of tail-spinning fun, but it was a downgrade from the PlayStation original, axing 7 stages and slashing cinematics to fit the cartridge. Slippery controls sent Gex sliding off cliffs, a sin compounded by the N64's foggy draw distance and a frame rate that chugged. Fans were split. Some dug the quirky worlds and 90s vibe, while others trashed the camera and irritating voices as overdone. In an N64 lineup stacked with polished giants, Gek64 became a battleground, a bold transplant, loved for its pluck, loathed for its stumbles, and a controversial misfit proving not every mascot could stick the landing on Nintendo's turf. And that's a wrap on Part 3. Another batch of Nintendo 64 legends that proved this little gray box wasn't afraid to stir the pot. Whether it was with explosive action, offbeat vibes, or designs that left us all arguing decades later. These games didn't just push buttons, they pushed boundaries, sparking everything from parental panic to fanboy feuds. And they've cemented their place in N64 lore as the rebels we can't stop talking about. Hey everyone, thank you so much for watching. What are your thoughts on these games? Were these games ahead of their time or just too wild for their own good? Let me know in the comments below. I'd love to get a conversation going with you. If you liked this video, please leave a like. If you didn't, that other button seems to work pretty well too. And if you're new here, please consider subscribing for a plethora of gaming-related content, including but not limited to controversial games. Thanks again for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.